It's masculinity. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So when a man hears that,
Yeah.
either explicitly or implicitly,
Right. Right.
right? What he's saying is, I can't do anything about that.
Right.
If you're talking about toxic masculinity, at least we can get down to what do you mean by toxic?
Right.
But if you're gonna say masculinity is the problem, then you're talking about me.
Yeah.
Like I'm fundamentally wrong.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm off, me.
Yeah.
And therefore, the only way to address that problem is I gotta go.
What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture. Now, let's just get to it. The whole secular sacred divide. There is no distinction in the scriptures. Some of us have trust issues with God, and some of us, it's like, does God really got us? You can't engage the culture with the gospel that first has not engaged you. Like, you know how people are like, oh, that's just who I am. Nah.
Keep. Drop the mic. Drop the mic. Drop the mic.
Shaping the code. What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture podcast. Hope all is well with you all, family. As you can see, I've got a guest with me today, and really, I don't even know if I should call you a guest. Just to give you guys some context, this brother right here was with me since day one. In fact, he was my third interview of all time back in 2017.
Wow.
We tackled the topic of engaging culture. It was Pastor Neb, Mickey, and BJ Thompson.
Wow.
Never forget that. 7 years ago, a little over 7 years ago.
Feels like forever.
And over the years, you've come on. We've talked about dating. We talked about love and relationships. We've talked cussing. That was a fun episode. Yeah. So
is that still out there?
The audio
somewhere.
file is. Yeah. It's still there. Yeah, I kept it. I kept all the good ones.
You know?
And so I'm thrilled to have him back on the podcast. He's more like family. We have none other than Pastor Neb with us. How you doing, sir?
Honored, man. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Good to be here. Good to hear all the good things happening with Shaping the Culture and going on with your ministry and all of the ways in which God's been opening doors and giving you opportunities to create space for conversations that need to be had. And so it's always a treat to be able to get together.
Always.
And to be able to hit record and have this time. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So one thing y'all need to know about the dynamic of this relationship is we're not going to do anything different than what we do off camera. I'm constantly bombarding him with questions. So, in fact, earlier on the ministry, every time something went wrong, Pastor Neb, what do I do here? What do I do there?
We all need one. Yeah,
exactly. And so I just want to say publicly how much I appreciate and respect your ministry. You're well-read, gentle, articulate, full of wisdom, and I have benefited greatly on a personal and ministry level being in a relationship with you. So it's a real honor to have you on the podcast, and I'm excited about what the Lord is going to do in this conversation.
Praise God. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you can probably tell by the thumbnail and the title that we're going to go there today. We're going to go there today. This is a conversation I've been wanting to have for a year and a half, but it's such a sensitive topic. So I've always wanted to do it with the right person, because I wanted to add value to the conversation and I wanted to be helpful, not polarizing, not controversial just to be controversial, because controversy is at times good, right? But I've wanted it to be edifying and helpful to the body of Christ. And so I trust you. I trust what God has deposited in you, and I trust that this conversation will do just that. And so before we kind of get into the weeds of it all, as I kind of think through and think about masculinity or biblical masculinity, I know there's just been a lot of confusion around why this topic is polarizing, why so many different people have different opinions on the topic. I kind of wanted to start off by asking you, like, what have you observed? What have you seen? How do you kind of make sense of all the different ideologies and philosophies around this topic and how we've consumed it as Christians? Like, what's been your experience with that?
Yeah. Well, when we look at just cultural landscape and we look around, I think at this point, it would be agreed that there's a boyhood crisis, to borrow a title from one book. There's also a masculinity crisis. And a lot of the reason for that is because men are not launching the way that they should. Society has taken a turn in terms of we're dealing with a lot of stuff, to be honest with you. And it's almost like they're all converging. So as a world, we're all asking all over again, as though we need to, and trying to answer the question, what is gender? Can gender be known and determined and identified? Is it something defined and given, or is it something created and preferred? On top of that, we're in a knowledge working world. We're in an information age where opportunities for women are there for them to be able to flourish and tap into access and to advantages just as much as men. And we're also seeing that that's requiring men to have to, and women to have to re-envision what their relationship to one another looks like. We can talk about the fatherhood crisis. We can talk about daddy deprivation and so forth, terms that are used that can also feed into why it's so problematic, this whole topic. We can even go into rites of passage. Right. Good. That's another thing that comes up and oftentimes comes up along the lines of this. In other words, in previous times, it seems like men had a way to be able to transition from one period of their life to the next. It was very obvious. You go through this, you do this, you travel here, and the community, the village, the town, the people affirm you and acknowledge you, and it's like you're in. Right. Whereas now, what are those rites of passages? Right. So you have those challenges as well. And so I think a lot of men are struggling because in some cases, the general message that they're getting is you're unnecessary. If you were to really boil it down, men are unnecessary. And I don't think that is marketable. And I don't think that that's going to really solve a solution. If we want to talk about past grievances, let's say that our sisters or women have had to deal with historically, I don't think the way to deal with that is by doing it all over again with the other gender. This is a little bit controversial, but I think in the same way that we want to make progress when it comes to race relations, I believe, and I know others can disagree, but I believe that there's a way to successfully do it and there's a way not to do it. Or that there's a way that will only further polarize groups. It's one thing to acknowledge racism. It's another thing to use racism to reverse racism. And I think in the same way, it's one thing to acknowledge what's happened or been done to our sisters or to women in the past. It's another thing to do it all over again, just on the other shoe. And I think what that will only do is it will further exasperate men. And I don't think we're gonna like what we would see.
So I'm picking up on this idea that maybe as a society, we've overcorrected, that we've gone too far left in trying to attempt to solve a problem that was pretty huge, necessary to address. And you bring up a few points, the boy crisis, daddy issues. You look at history and how men have treated women, and it hasn't always been good. It hasn't always been edifying. It hasn't always been God honoring.
Rites of passages.
Rites of passages, right? And I actually really resonate with that, because for me, even I don't know when I became a man. Is it when I went off to college? Is it when I inherited student debt? Is it when I got a credit card? Is it when I got my apartment, bought my first car?
Right.
I just kind of got thrown into the world, and here you go, figure it out. And so with all these different problems that you bring to the table, is there one that resonates with you most? Or do you think that all of these are components that need to be explored?
Yeah, I think they all are.
Yeah.
I think fathers have a huge role.
Yeah, that's it.
In being able to make sure that young men are positioned well to be able to eventually launch. And the data is out there. The numbers are there. The jury is no longer out on this, and there's been so many different figures, both in and outside of the church, who've really spoken to this and addressed it. More men are likely to have run-ins with the law than women. More men than women are in prison. More men than women actually proceed forward and commit suicide, although women attempt more. And the reason why they're able to be more successful than just attempting is because typically when men toy with suicidal ideations, they don't do so in the exact same way that women do, whereas women can recover from it, however painful it may have been up to the point, because usually it's maybe pills that they unsuccessfully downed, or maybe it's cutting that didn't go all of the way and made them bleed out, or other forms. Whereas with men, they usually use lethal means.
Right.
And so it's one and done.
Right.
It's hard to walk that one back. It's hard to have a second chance. Right. More women have received their driver's license at a sooner rate than men. More women are in college than men. More women, I believe at this point, are in medical school than men. More women are in church than men. So I think you're noticing that you'll see this a lot of times is that men are not knowing how to play the game well in these places. And a lot of what accounts for the discrepancy has to do with whether there was a father physically present, and if he was physically around, if he was useful.
That's right.
And understood what his role was in his children's life, especially his boys.
No, that's good. Because whenever someone said, my dad wasn't physically around, I could never really relate. So I didn't feel like I could understand the ramifications of that. But then you start realizing they can be physically present, but emotionally absent. And so
100%.
You too can kind of suffer from the consequences of that. And
That's
so,
right.
and I think this is important to tackle, because we are now becoming husbands and fathers, and unless you are aware of the cycle, you can't break the cycle. So what does it look like for a father to be what about the father's presence is instrumental in raising masculine men? The main thing is modeling. That's good.
The main thing is modeling. What's interesting is there's been a lot of studies that have come out with a lot of books on masculinity and manhood. And one of the things that they pointed out is that one of the reasons that men play such a positive role as we look back at the data historically is that the kid was able to be around the man a lot more. And therefore, the whole idea, some things are better caught than taught. So what you'll notice is nowadays, even if you may have an intact home or nuclear family or whatever, if the guy has the kind of a job where he gets into the car, pulls out of the driveway, waves to the family, but he drives 20, 30 minutes away to apparently this job where he's there for 8+ hours. And then he comes back to his kid, and for his kid only all the while never to be exposed to what that part of his life is, which is like 10 hours per day. So much value that's there that would go into the development of that kid is lost because they basically just get the tired version of the dad.
Right.
However much of him he's got left to just kind of play with them or engage with them or help them with homework.
Yeah.
You really don't get a chance to see dad engaging with coworkers, peers, maybe even supervisor and boss, dealing with drama, navigating conflict, taking on work, breaking it down, achieving a project, and just however manual the labor is or however non-manual it is. But in any case, there's a lot there that is to be gained.
Right.
And I think for a kid to just be dropped off at school and know that this dad does that and not to be able to tap into that, access that and observe and be able to ask questions accordingly, that was what really happened during agrarian societies. That's what happened when parents, couples, or dads owned their own shops or businesses and had to engage with the community. The kids were able to be along. And I think where and when you can, if you can, set your life up in such a way where your kids could be, I mean, this is key. This is the win, is if you can be thinking ahead and have vision, starting with the end in mind. And some of the ways to do this is by having older people in your life who are already there. They can really spark ideas. And they're older couples. They're in a season where you're not, but they're like, man, with a couple of decisions and determine, we can be there. And our own home could be set up in a way where I want my kids to be more a part of my life than usual. And that way they're not learning everything from a book.
That's right.
Right? They're walking with you. And I think
yeah.
Jesus and his disciples really shows a lot of that, right? A lot of their questions flowed from observing him. Why'd you do that? Why'd you say that? Why did you not do that? Why did you not say this? Right?
That's good. You know, what that reminds me of? I remember this was like maybe 5-6 years ago. I was in the gym and I worked out, and after I was done, I went down to the cafeteria to get a protein shake, went on my way, and I ordered it, and I was waiting for my protein shake to be served. And as I was there, I saw a father and a son, and the father was teaching his son how to read the nutritional facts in the back.
Yeah.
Now, when I tell you I started crying,
wow,
I didn't know why. I was like, why is this is not an emotional thing? And I quickly got my protein shake and I left. And I had to really think about, why was that? I don't know if it was triggering or what it was. And then it dawned on me maybe a few weeks later. I think that was such an emotional experience for me because I didn't have that. I got myself in a predicament and I had to get myself out of it. I didn't know how to eat right. I didn't know how to exercise. And I just had to figure it out on my own. I didn't have someone to come alongside and say, hey, this is what you should look for. This is what a macro is.
That's right.
This is how much protein you need in a day. You know, if you want muscles, this is what you should be consuming. This is how many hours of sleep you should have. Like none of that was taught to me. I had to it's trial and error. You kind of have to figure that out on your own. And so the modeling piece really resonates with me. And so
that modeling, and it speaks to a rite of passage. So, you know, I have 4 kids. 3 are girls, 1 is a boy, and is a teenager, high schooler age. And I notice along some of those lines, we listen to some of the same podcasts. You know, manospheres or, you know, self-development and whether that has to do with diet, nutrition, or how to just increase productivity just working on different areas of our lives. Right. And it's interesting how it began with him just being in the car listening to those podcasts and then being able to consume them himself. Or a lot of my books, I deliberately built a library so that I wanted to make sure that it's my inheritance. The wealth is in all of that.
That's good.
All of that, all of those resources, right? And so it's the closer I can bring it to my children and to my son, the better. Right. And if they can just develop a love for that, the world is theirs. And they can access all that they're in need of. And it's beautiful how what began with just me having it around, all of a sudden I'm wondering, like, where are my books? Like, what is, and I already know where to go now first before I have to look anywhere else. There's a good chance it's there, right? And almost always it is. He's get started on it, right? He says, I saw you reading it last time, or it looked good to me, or I heard it on a podcast, and I was like, hey, Dad has that, right? And it's beautiful to just see him tuning into stuff, either online, social media, or podcast, and then I've seen that, or I've heard that, or I've somewhere around the house.
Right.
And it's like, wow, what I'm learning from afar is right here in my home, which means my dad's up on game. He's up to speed on this. And so I think that also is motivating for a young boy to not have to find his hero or to find someone to follow outside, but to be able to know that the closest man in his life is interested in those kinds of things. So I think it's nice to be able to work out together, take walks together, talk about what sort of new, that looks like a new routine. Where'd you pick that up at? What are your goals? And to be able to just kind of talk about that and not feel like that's my own thing. We can share that. It's one more thing that we have in common. And so I think rite of passage is not something that has to wait till they're 20 something. It could be something very small, like, hey, get over here real quick. This is called Nutrition Facts. I know you typically look at it, but you're quick to drink. Let me show you that there's a reason for all of this, right? And I think if we would just simply look at everything that's in front of us, there's plenty of opportunities to be able to bring them along.
Yeah. No, that's good. I feel like we can spend a whole podcast just talking about that. But let's discuss, for those who didn't have a father, or maybe they were present physically but not emotionally, and now you got all these men for one reason or another. I know you listed a myriad of reasons why we have the problems that we do have. Let's say, looking at our cultural landscape, we've got very polarizing views on what the problem is and what the solution is. So you've got guys tuning into content that tells them that they need to be more feminine. And then you got guys that will tune into content like the red pill stuff, that telling them, this is what masculinity is. And there's a divide here. One camp says manhood is this, or what it means to be a male is this. And then you got another camp that's telling them the complete opposite. And very polarizing. I mean, we don't know how to get along with these conversations, and people have very differing views on what manhood should be. It's kind of concerning how much attack is coming on masculinity and men and things like that. And so I kind of wanted to ask you, how do you make sense of the polarization? Do you feel like the different camps all have something of value to share? Is there anything that concerns you about what's being out there, what's being spewed out here? Like, how do you process all of this?
Well, I'm definitely concerned with the two extremes. Effeminacy concerns me because the Bible talks about not being effeminate. The Bible talks about being secure in who we are. And I think a lot of the gender confusion is not being served and addressed well, rather than bringing a level of both empathy and truth. If we simply bring empathy, then all we're going to do is come alongside in total support of what people think they need to be or to be doing. And that's often not helpful. And so our boys, our men are only going to suffer by that. And sometimes it could be because they didn't have healthy models of masculinity around them. Sometimes it could have to do with abuse, and they were groped, molested, abused, taken advantage of early on. And that opens up a whole Pandora's box of sexuality and how to think of themselves and view themselves. And they can go down a whole path that swings toward that other extreme. But then you have the other side where it could be a very unhealthy and toxic way of trying to reinforce masculinity. And so biblically what we notice is masculinity is neither effeminacy nor is it machismo. It's not tyranny. It's not dominance. It's who Christ is. Right? It's who Christ is. And I think the only reason why the red pill community took off, well, one is because social media and the ability to have reach. I think that's huge. It's been around in different pockets, but it never took because it didn't have the platform to be able to take, right? So for example, when you look at guys like Tate or someone, Andrew Tate, it was able to take because he was coming on the scene at a time where if you knew how to handle social media, things can just go viral easily, right? And his sort of spiel is sensational enough, especially at that time, given the climate, to be able to take. Right. So it's just oxygen and fuel. You have fire. Right. So I think that's also important to keep in mind. I think the red pill community is not a monolith.
No.
So there's no one pope that speaks for all of them. I think there is an element of the red pill community that should be listened to. And I think they need the gospel just as much as anyone. They need to be reached for Christ. They need compassion. They need someone to draw near to them, just like we should be prepared to draw near to any groups who need Christ. And I think one of the grievances has to do with the fact that when you tell a group that they're unnecessary and you don't give them the tools, but they still have to be around, at a certain point, they're going to find one another.
That's it. That's it right there.
You see that? And so you may have not expected that was going to happen, but that's what happens, is they're going to find one another and they're going to come up with their own ideologies and own ways of taking a stand. And you may regret it. In the end. You see? And what concerns me though about the red pill community is that they'll take biblical truths that you'll find in scripture out of context, and they will use it as justification for whatever it is their talking point. So I think the one thing that they have going for them though is, and you see this among the Kevin Samuels and so forth, in all that concerned me with him, the one thing that I'm willing to at least acknowledge is that one of the points, among many, but one of the points that he was trying to point out is men are not women and women are not men. So women, if you're really all that interested in being with a man and being pursued by a man, don't try to prepare yourself for eventual relationship and commitment and marriage the same way a man would prepare himself.
That's right. That's good.
That was the triggering, controversial statement. Is men get ready for marriage or relationship in different ways than women. It doesn't matter to a man how much you're making or how hard you're working to eventually make that much. That's not the selling point for a man. I'm sorry to tell you, is what he was saying. And he's saying, look, I'm sorry nobody else is saying this.
He could have said it nicer.
Exactly. But that's his way. That's right. That was his way of pointing that out. Right. So
just to speak to that a little bit, I know when Kevin Samuels exploded, I'm thinking about Andrew Tate. I had a lot of Christian men hit me up. It's kind of like Nicodemus coming to Jesus at night when no one's around and people are like, all these Christian men are like, hey, yo, like I don't like the way he said it, but man, this brother's preaching, or hey, I'm not with all of his solutions, but this brother really talking about the problem. And I wanted to kind of get into that a little bit. Like, what is it about what the red pill community is selling that is so attractive to not just men, but Christian men? Like, what is it about the messaging that there's something within us that says, yes, this is manhood. This is masculinity.
Well, they don't demonize men. So it goes back to the problem in in what was going on that men were hearing for a while, and that is that they're unnecessary,
right?
And that it's not toxic masculinity that's the problem,
Right?
It's masculinity that's the problem.
Yeah.
So when a man hears that, either explicitly or implicitly, right, what he's saying is, I can't do anything about that,
right?
If you're talking about toxic masculinity, at least we can get down to what do you mean by toxic,
right?
But if you're gonna say masculinity is the problem, then you're talking about me, like I'm fundamentally wrong.
Wow,
like I'm off, me, and therefore the only way to address that problem is I gotta go. I need to be off this planet. If I can just leave, if I can just disappear, then the world has found their solution. Right? So smash the patriarchy, that whole context is like, just get rid of them. Right? Well, that's not going to work good. So here comes along your taste. Here comes along and says, no. You're necessary. You're useful. You inherently are not the problem. Right? Now, Peterson, Jordan Peterson, wouldn't identify with red pill, of course. In fact, he would take issue with some of these guys, like even the ones that we mentioned with. I'm not sure if he would even want to sit down with them or whatever the case may be. But in any case, I think where Peterson would try to find a different way of saying some of the same things would be, he provides at least help and strategies for how to start where you're at, either with your anger management issues or perhaps with your bitterness toward others, the incel community and so forth, or your frustration with being able to stack up marketable, employable skill sets, and forge a path forward for yourself. Make your bed, right? And then 12 rules for life. So I think one of the reasons why someone like a Peterson appealed to a lot of men is he didn't beat a lot of men up like a lot of men within the church did in the early 2000s, right? Man up. Right?
How dare you?
What's wrong with you guys? Right? So it was more, I believe in you. So he was very father-like. He's old enough to be a dad to many. And I think he came along at just the right time. I think what also appealed to men about red pill and these is they're actually taking a stand. They had to, it cost them. I think that appeals to a lot of men when they say or have to do things that where, and the book Anti-Fragile, Nabil, Talib. He wrote a book called Anti-Fragile, and he talks a lot about Black Swan theory, and he talks a lot about stakes. The stakes have to be high. One of the ways you enter into negotiations during the Arabian period, when they would exchange and barter, and build banks in the desert, primitive banks, or they would exchange between merchants all the way down to the present and shares and stock in New York. One of the ways that that someone is worth proceeding forward with, either in following their leadership or doing anything with them, is how much of the risk factor have they absorbed, or are they willing to absorb? And I think that's also important in knowing how to build tribes, a pack, and in knowing how to know who's going to be the chief, because there is that tribal instinct in us. Part of us wants to be alone and have a solo side to us where we can do our thing, but as men, we long to find a tribe. And if you're going to find a tribe, you also want to know who the chief is.
It's good.
And that's why in church it's very hard for a lot of men, because they need to know when they're sitting those pews. It's like, can I follow this guy? Right? And has this guy demonstrated? What heel have they taken? What bruises, what bullet have they taken? What sort of risk has come to them to be able to enjoy that role or position, or to be even have the ability to say what they're saying.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's good. That reminds me of a conversation I had with a member of mine. One day he came into my office and he said, I was dealing with some consequences of, having a certain theological stance. And I mean, it got messy and it was hard. I mean, anybody around me could see that, like, putting my feet down here, it was costly. And he came in, and I think he came in to encourage me, but he said, I'm inspired by the fact that this was costly for you, but at least we all know where you stand, and you were willing to, like, let us know no matter the consequence.
Yeah.
And then he said, I need to find what I believe in so that I can honor the cost of that.
That's good.
I wanted to ask you, what do men look for? Like, what is masculinity or biblical masculinity? Like, I know we've been covering a little bit about what this person says and that person says and this community says and that community, but, like, when it comes to honoring the cause, that's something that I know resonates with men. When Piper says, wage war against your sin, yes, men are like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, let's wage war, you know what I mean? Like, even language like that, there's just something about it that resonates with us. But, like, as you kind of think about what Jesus modeled for us,
right,
as you think about the example laid out before us, like, what is masculinity? What is biblical masculinity?
Yeah. Well, I would say biblical masculinity would be where it should include sacrifice.
Yeah.
It should include responsibility.
Yeah.
It should include the ability to bear a burden. It should include the ability to lead.
Yeah.
And it should include the ability to love. So sacrifice is one of those ingredients in the pot.
Yeah.
Part of biblical masculinity is you have to be willing to die or deny some things for others, something greater.
Yeah.
So sacrifice has to be a part of it. It's at the heart of the gospel.
Yeah.
Jesus sacrificed himself.
Yeah.
And so biblical masculinity is not about sacrificing others for the sake of your gains.
Right.
You're not using others or exploiting others for the sake of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
You're willing to lay your own life on the line so that others may be able to benefit from that, right? So as men, we stay up later and longer, sweating and thinking and wrestling with things that others should not have to waste their time over.
Yeah.
That's part of what it means to be husband, father, man, whether that's our enterprises, our organizations, or our ministries, or our homes, our families. It's my job to worry about that.
Yeah.
And I want to worry in such a way where I don't want them to have to worry.
Right. That's good.
Right.
Good.
So that's sacrifice. Is I'm sacrificing my own well-being in many ways because until I solve this thing, so that you guys can enjoy your well-being.
Yeah.
So that's sacrifice. Responsibility.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be passing the buck. We shouldn't be part of biblical masculinity is assuming, Adam, where are you?
Yeah.
Hey, wait a second. It was her.
Right.
She was why don't you talk to her?
Yeah.
Well, he came to him because he held him responsible for what she and they both participated in.
Right.
Paul says through one man sin entered into the world. Wait a second. No. Through one woman, right? No. He understands that. Responsibility.
That's good.
Right? We were the ones who sinned and were deserving of the punishment that was due our sin.
Right.
But the Bible says he made him who knew no sin to be made sin for us.
Yeah.
He was responsible for us on the cross.
So good.
That wasn't his sin that he was dying for.
Yeah.
So sacrifice, responsibility, burden. It's been said before, and I think it deserves repeating, and that is men are like trucks. And like the bed of a truck or even an 18-wheeler, the more weight on them, the straighter they drive.
Right. That's good.
You ever seen a truck out there with a little bit of wind on the highway? Its back end is just all over the lanes.
Not enough burden.
Yeah. And that's how a lot of men are when they're just constantly like, no, I don't want that responsibility. No, I don't want that burden. No, I have too much. It's like, you don't have anything. It's like if you're spending all your time avoiding, passing up on opportunities to carry a burden, then you're too lightweight.
Yeah. Wow.
And you're liable to be swerving all over with your life.
Yeah.
Whereas it's amazing how when you have the right burden on you, you don't even have the time to get into trouble. Right? I'm too tired
Yeah.
right now to be out and about in town,
Yeah.
right? Messing around,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm too tired to get drunk.
Yeah.
I'm too tired to be messing around with drugs. I'm too tired to be chasing skirts. I'm too tired to be out and about downtown, right?
Yeah.
It's usually you had too much time on your hands when that season of your life existed.
Yeah.
And so I think men are built to bear burdens. And I think that's important in a unique way.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we're called to lead.
Yeah.
We're called to be Jesus was the servant leader.
Yeah.
He led the way.
Yeah.
And he had his disciples follow. He didn't say, just go do this and do that and don't do this. Rather, he led the way in what was to be done, and he brought others along, right, in doing so. And I think love is the ultimate. He did all of this out of love.
Yeah.
Right? He did all of this out of love.
That's good. The burden piece, I remember Matt Chandler saying, there's nothing more dangerous than a bored man.
Wow. Yeah.
And him talking about how he wants to go home and go to bed tired. He works all day. He pulls up to the driveway and he prays this prayer, Lord, give me the strength to pursue my wife's heart and to play with my kids.
That's it.
So he goes home. He's on the ground wrestling with his kids. They eat dinner. They put the kids to bed, and he's in bed laying with his wife, pursuing his wife's heart. And then he
retires.
And gets up and does it all over again. As you're naming these attributes, sacrifice, burden, leadership, responsibility. I want to play devil's advocate just a little bit.
Sure.
What if someone tuning in says, well, a woman can do all those things. Like, I know feminine women who carry burden. They carry a lot of burden, actually. I know women who lead. I know women who have sacrifice. Like, what is it specifically about masculinity that makes leadership look different, burden look different, sacrifice look different? Like, what is there a difference? Like, how would one engage that? Like, what's the difference there?
Yeah. It's a common question, and it would be answered the same way that a woman could find in Christ what to emulate.
Yeah.
But nobody's in any doubt that Jesus is a man.
Yeah.
That they're emulating.
Yeah.
Right. So those qualities, it doesn't mean that even though we're saying these are what exist in a man, that they can't also be found in a woman. When you bring a woman into the picture, and you want to make sense out of all of this all over again, with men in relationship to women, the way to helpfully show the difference is men are leading in these things.
That's good.
Men are initiating in these things.
Yeah.
Right? So they both possess and exhibit these qualities, but they possess and exhibit them in a gendered way. You never at any point lay aside your gender in order to pursue or maximize or excel in any particular quality or characteristic.
Right.
Those characteristics are like spirits or demons, they need a body.
Right.
In the same way, those characteristics need to be found somewhere.
Right.
And that's going to explain just as much how they're going to look and what the difference is at all, if there is a difference. Right. So let's go to the text. Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
A man and a woman.
Right.
Both Adam and Eve were called to be sacrificial.
Yeah.
But Eve is called to sacrifice in a gendered fashion, in a way that would be commiserate or consistent with who she was as a woman of God.
Right.
Adam, on the other hand, was also supposed to sacrifice, but in a way that made total sense for Adam in a gendered way as a man.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's important for us. And then you can go all the way down from sacrifice to responsibility to burden and so forth. Right?
Yeah.
And so, you carry them in different ways. You could look at, if we fast forward to the New Testament, and you look at Christ, the bridegroom, man, and the church is likened to a bride, woman. And so they both are to exhibit sacrifice and responsibility and to lead and to carry burdens, but they're different. Jesus initiated in responsibility, and he led the way in carrying the burden, and we follow him and respond to his initiation. Right. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
I love that. No, that's awesome. I feel like there's so much to pick apart at that, but I think like you clearly laid it out, and I know we can follow up on that, but just for time's sake, we don't have you for so long. I want to get into this idea of, what does that look like specifically in the church? I know we're talking about it predominantly right now through, in the household, marriage, husband and wife. But I need to ask you this question, because I've had many conversations with men who will tell me that, man, bro, I love God. I love the Lord. But church, it's just, there's something about church that I don't resonate with. They feel like the church has been feminized. We were talking off here a little bit about this. Even the worship music feels a little like Jesus is my boyfriend, where it's love and grace, and there we do need to talk about the love of God. We do need to talk about the grace of God. But I had a friend one time say, like, the Muslim faith is more appealing to me because there's discipline, there's holiness, there's reverence, there's something about that religion as a man that makes me say, I can get with that, like I can follow that, like that. There's a model there that resonates with my masculine traits. And so I kind of wanted to ask you, like, I love how we've been talking about what this looks like in the home between a husband and wife, but like even within the church, do we have a boy crisis in the church? Am I in my head? Because when men tell me this, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I totally get that. What is going on in the church? Has culture just seeped into? I know the church is called to shape the culture, but has culture shaped the church? Like what's going on in the church where it feels like men don't feel like they can be led there, they can be discipled there, they can be challenged there, they can grow there, they can mature there? Like what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, you have a number of challenges, and I think there's a good book, Why Men Hate Going to Church. I think it's David Murrow who wrote it a decade or so ago.
I got to check that book out.
And he was attempting to try to get at the bottom of this.
Yeah.
And different individuals have tried to attempt to offer an explanation. So like what you said, these are all suggested reasons that may or may not explain why men are not prone or inclined toward going to the church. And some could be, is it the music? The question asked. Do we need to go back to hymns where it's more rich in doctrine and truth? And do we need to go back to singing psalms? Do we need to turn the lights on? Is it because the lights are off? Is it because the sermons are too much geared toward women? Or maybe they're not geared toward women. They're just not really addressing what men are trying to hear. People ask these kinds of questions. Are some of the programs, the activities, the Bible studies, and the ways in which they have people organize themselves more suited for women and what works for their wiring and temperament than it is for men? Is too much of the church activity face to face rather than shoulder to shoulder? There's that whole saying, men are more they bond more shoulder to shoulder. Give them an activity, a mission, a project, and they happen to eventually bond. Whereas women, you just give them one another, and it's an end in and of itself. They know how to connect. You have all of these, and I think they may have their place. And I think we have to consider that and think about that. Sometimes it could also be maybe the pastor spent 8-10 years in seminary and so forth, right? So he's got khakis and nice shoes, and he stays in an AC room, and his hands are nice and soft, and he reads lots of books, and his vocabulary is way up there, and he feels or seems intimidating when we hear him. You're too eloquent. You use words we don't know. And your illustrations and examples don't land. We try to bring up stuff and you're clueless. You don't even know what's going on in the culture. And you're constantly quoting footnotes, and we feel we can't relate with you on a Tuesday evening. Right?
When it's just the guys.
And when it's just the guys, or a Friday night or a Saturday. And therefore we're going to stay at a distance. Whereas the women are drawn toward that kind of thing. Right? So I think those kinds of things could be challenges as well. We see with Islam, you can tell like there's certain individuals, celebrities, athletes, and so forth who gravitate toward that for certain reasons. I think with Christianity, we need to make sure that we create different ways for men to be challenged, to start where they're at, and then to go from there. I think we need to be far more intentional in our discipleship of them, rather than accidentally reaching them or hopefully reaching them, but rather deliberately reaching them. And I think one of the ways that can be achieved is by trusting them sooner than later. That's one. And the second thing is by not demonizing them.
That's good.
I think a lot of times what happens is we don't know what to do with them. They're just trouble. They got all this testosterone and aggression and energy, and they go in different directions, and they're kind of and therefore what we try to do is we try to bridle them. So sometimes men may be more interested in asking more questions. They may want to wrestle with a lot of theological truths. Is the church the kind of environment that can create space for that? Or do we say, hey, you keep coming here with that kind of stuff, you're going to be out of here? Right? Is there a way that men can ask questions and learn? I think they shouldn't feel intimidated or feel like they're going to be seen like a troublemaker. The other one is men may not kick whatever habit or struggle they brought into faith or into the church immediately. Do we have the ability to have the patience with accountability, layers of accountability, to walk with them while they're in community in order for them to eventually? Because for a lot of guys, it feels like I need to have already arrived. Otherwise, why bother? You know what? I'm just going to wait till I got this thing under control. Then I'm going to come. And so I think that has also explained why a lot of men try to do everything outside of the church before they ever come to the church, because they're afraid of how they're perceived. Right. So I think a lot of guys who are in the church forgot what it was like to be a man before they were in the church, when that's their greatest asset. If, a lot of the guys who are most successful with reaching men in the city are guys in all of their growth never forgot what it was like before they were saved. So there's a realness about them, even though there's growth and maturity to them. And what I find is usually it's an extreme. You're either raw and wilding out and just a mess and no positive influence for anybody, or you are just so quote unquote saved that it's like you're untouchable, and you can't relate to anybody, and therefore you're a turnoff to a lot of guys.
How do we show up for men? We were talking about this a little bit off here too, but a woman goes through a heartbreak. She has her community. They'll come over. They'll watch rom-coms. They'll eat a bucket of ice cream. They'll cry together.
That's right.
And the healing process and journey is a lot more faster because they're not doing it alone. Men, we isolate and we kind of what you're talking about. We try to figure it out on our own because men are not allowed to be weak. I've seen this in the church. I've even seen this with myself as a leader. Like, if I'm supposed to carry burdens, if I'm supposed to be responsible, if I'm supposed to lead, then I can't show that I'm struggling with X, Y, Z, right? And so what does it look like to allow men to show up as they are and to show up for them as they come as they are? You know what I mean? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I would say, for starters, I wouldn't want personally to suggest that men have to do it exactly like women.
Yeah.
Because again, men are not women and women are not men.
Yeah.
And I think each of us needs to know how to process in a way that suits us and that's consistent with who we are.
Yeah.
And neither one of us should expect the other person to do it my way.
Yeah.
However, we should have a way.
Yeah. That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so I think that's important as well. So with men, it may not be rom-com and it may not be ice cream and so forth, but I do think that men need to find spaces to be able to, this is actually the benefit of community if men were in church and community. So I would put it a little differently, is this would be one thing that would be brought up to point out to men, hey, by the way, when you're going through it, and we all do, and when your life hits a tough spot, and all our lives do, since you hate church, and since you're not found in community, this is what you're missing out. That your sisters are able to enjoy and appreciate. You see what I'm saying? So I think offering it almost like a selling point, almost like this is one of the benefits and the advantages that come with being in community. It may be hard for men to be able to, and sometimes what can explain that is women are more relational beings, and their EQ is a lot higher at times than men. Emotional intelligence. And so these sort of qualities and skill sets, the ability to read face, the ability to read expression and articulate and have the vocabulary to string words together and to communicate and converse, a lot of men could quietly do what they need to do. They could be around each other and not have to talk. Right? And I think for men, again, it's not, my push never has been, nor ever will be, to see those women, you need to do that. Rather is sometimes a man just may need to be around other men, and you may not need to say anything, but you may just need to have the peace of mind of knowing as soon as you're ready to talk, at least you're around enough of them to be able to do so.
That's good.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I think that's important as well. I think we do need to overcome some of the unhelpful stereotypes that we picked up along the way, that aren't consistent with truth. And so we need to perhaps recover and address encounter the whole idea of, what it means to be weak.
Right? I mean, can we talk about that a little bit? Because what does it look like for a man to be weak? I'll give a funny example. There's this show called Love is Blind. And this past season that just came out, we were talking about this with some church friends. There was a guy on there who was unable to commit. He found his partner in the pods. They, built a relationship. They made it to the resort, and everything was going well. They met each other's families, and then when it came down to say that I do is at the altar, he wasn't able to. And the reason why he wasn't able to is because he saw his father cheat on his mother growing up. In fact, his father would take him when he would go cheat on his mom, and that messed with him. And his whole life, he just built this narrative that like he would end up like his father, and he didn't know how to be faithful to one woman. And, he went on the show looking for love, thinking that finding love will make him more faithful, but he just still had those weaknesses and so on and so forth. And so he on the show came out and expressed like, hey, this is, he even brought his father on, his mother on. They really aired out their dirty laundry in front of the world. But then you look at the way the world responded, and it was like, it's just an excuse. He's not really about it. He's giving me player vibes. And that certainly could be the case. Like, I don't want to rule that out. But I was like, is anybody going to address the fact that he's got some real wounds here that could possibly show up in the way he's able or unable to commit to someone? And I don't know. I don't see much space in church or culture for men to be weak. It's looked at as an excuse, or, you know, you're not really about this, or, and I get it. Sometimes men will manipulate and, you know, we'll use our wounds and our whatever to kind of get away with things. But then there are genuine men who are genuinely trying, but have things that prohibit them from being the best version of themselves, and they don't know where to go with that. They don't know how to overcome some of that. What would you say to that?
Yeah. So this is kind of where, again, I'm very nuanced when I look at, there are things where I have clearly denounced within the red pill community.
Yeah.
But again, I've always tried to be somebody who still looks for something I can pull out of there, with all that I may take issue with.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I think you asked a question earlier is like, what is it that's resonating within the red pill community, or men who represent having come from the red pill community, to these men today?
Yeah.
What is it that they're saying? I know I shouldn't be listening, but I think it's the fact that they say the unspoken thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things is, men should not identify with weakness the same way women should. And there is a layer of truth to that.
Yeah.
See, I think a lot of this, when you really take time and just pause and think about it, there's a layer of truth to some of these things. But because talking points without nuance go viral.
That's right.
Where you don't say, now, what I don't mean is, you know, if you qualify everything you say, it loses its power and its potency. Right? That's not going to go viral.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you just drop it and then you're out of there, it's like, I can't believe he said that.
Right.
And then when they're on the next podcast and show, it's like, hey, we have this clip. Can we just play it real quick?
Yeah.
What did you mean by that? Well, come on. Did you really think that was what I meant?
Yeah.
You obviously knew I didn't mean this by that. Well, I don't know. You tell us.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's also that's important to keep in mind, especially when it comes to something like this as well. Is the reason why I say that is Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 3, he says, husbands, dwell with your wives with all knowledge, for they're the weaker vessel. Be not bitter toward them. That's pretty politically incorrect.
Oh, yeah. I'm waiting for the exegesis. Exposit the text, Pastor. Yeah.
Right? Well, first of all, we cannot deny, without even exegeting the text, we can't deny the fact that it's in the text.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what at least it says.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it says.
Yeah.
Now, what it means by what it says is a whole nother thing, but at least that's what it says.
Right.
They are the weaker vessel. So whatever it means, they're the weaker vessel. Otherwise, he should have just said, because you two are the weaker vessel. Right?
Yeah.
So they're the weaker vessel. So obviously he's drawing upon Genesis. He's drawing upon a whole redemptive storyline and idea.
Yeah.
And he's bringing all of that to bear
Yeah.
in their gendered roles that have to be played out with each other in that context. Well, obviously men have more brute strength, right? Which is why in our day, you know, we don't want XY chromosome men competing, you know, within the context of spaces where there's only women, especially if we're talking about boxing, or if we're talking about where you have to deal blows with each other, UFC and so forth, right? We want to protect them, because men have far more, 10 times the amount, the moment puberty begins, of testosterone that a woman does. You're just at a far superior advantage. A man's bone density is far greater. This is just biology, right? Is far greater than that of a woman. So just on one level that's the case. And I think also, if we were to take it further, it's not just plumbing, right? But it's also the fact that men are supposed to be oriented toward the world. I mean, for a while, we were having to live in the wild.
That's right.
Undomesticated life. We were still pioneering.
Yeah.
You know, we hadn't made it to lands that are domesticated now, and with electricity and streets paved and AC and home and security guards and police and law enforcement, right? So men, by and large, had to be the kind of men that had what it took to be able to protect their homes, their villages, their towns, their communities, their wives and their children. And therefore they had to relate with weakness in a way differently than women. And I think, but that doesn't mean that a man can't be weak. But here's the, and here, this is what's important. I'd love to, if we simply talk about it this way, it'll turn men off. I think one of the ways that we could win men's heart as it relates to looking at weakness differently is, don't identify with your weakness as an end in and of itself. You're going somewhere with it.
That's good.
Right? There's a goal. If a man could know that, then he'll probably be willing to sit in therapy. He'll probably be willing to meet with a counselor. He'll probably be willing to find himself in an accountability group. But the moment that he discovers that this thing is just an end in and of itself, it feels too feminine for him. You see what I'm saying? So it's very important that he's not being asked to be vulnerable simply for vulnerability's sake. Because he just feels too uncomfortable about divulging a ton of information. Now just somebody else knows it, and nothing for my good has come out of that. So men need to see the outcome of revealed weakness. Oh, that's who I'm going to be? That version of myself is awaiting me? Okay. Let me be weak. Right? Even Paul, when he was invited to be weak by Jesus, he didn't just say, just be weak in 2 Corinthians 12. What do you mean you're praying for this thorn to be removed from you? Just be weak. Come on, man. We're all over here weak. What's wrong with being weak? That, you see, this is where the red pill community is like, And it's like, I knew something was off about that. And I'm glad I'm hearing somebody who says, don't be weak. Be strong. Ryan Holiday's and stoicism and, you know, tapping into the Marcus Aurelius's and so forth, right? Like, why is that whole industry a cottage industry now? It's just resurfacing. People are just re-digging up stoicism. Men in this day, because it's like, yeah, that's right. It's like, that's not getting me ready for anything. What outcome? Men are all about outcomes. So if you could point out that there is an outcome to weakness, you got them identifying with weakness. If all you do is talk about weakness, you don't have them with weakness. They stay in. You see that?
Powerful.
Yeah.
So good.
When I'm weak, then I'm strong.
And that's the win.
That's the win.
As a man, it's like, well, if I care about the glory of God, if I care about the will of God, I'll glory in my weakness because it's a platform for God's strength to be made. Exactly. That's a word, Pastor Neb. That's so good. I think we can easily talk for another hour. We might have to do a part 2, part 3. Might be a whole series because I got more questions. But I did kind of, as we land the plane, want to ask you, how are you praying? How are you, like, what in your own heart, in your own time, when you think about the men that you shepherd, you've got a son, the men in your life, what's your burden, and how, what are you doing to move towards the solution? Like, how are you in your own personal life kind of tackling this idea of biblical masculinity?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, Paul told Timothy, watch both your life and your doctrine, for in so doing, you will save both yourself and your hearers. And I think that's sober and that's real, is those two things, your life and your doctrine, your character and what you believe and teach, right? And I think I love that order, is make sure that your life is consistent with God's will and you're not a phony or a fraud or a fake, that you're living this stuff, you're walking the walk, you're not just talking the talk. You're not perfect, you're not sinless, you're not Jesus, but at least there's some level of integrity to your life, that this is what you want, this is what you're aiming for, this is the trajectory at least of your life, right? I want to be like Jesus, the true man of God. And then your teaching. And I think that has a powerful impact. He says you'll save both yourself,
Yeah.
it'll do you good,
Yeah.
and you'll save your hearers.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I'm praying for along those lines is, Lord, help me to make sure that I'm cleaning house and I am towing the line for myself.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, guard my doctrine, what I'm teaching. I don't want to buy into some ideology. I don't want to get caught up on some other agenda. I want my one agenda to be Jesus. I want to make it all about Jesus. Real men love Jesus, know Jesus, serve Jesus, and want to be like Jesus.
That's
right. So I think that's really been helping me. I want to move toward men and not wait for men to come to me.
That's good.
I want to take a lot of chances on men. That's what I do, because I know a lot of guys have track records. They have past. They have things that they're still sorting through, and I don't want to just have them be benched until they finally figure it out and have it all together. I think we got to start somewhere.
Yes,
and that's right where they're at.
That's right.
And I think there's got to be layers of ways to onboard them.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that they have to be an elder after they've just come back to church the first day, but I think there's two extremes. There's nothing, and then they're elder.
Right.
And it's like, okay, if those are my two options, it's like, good luck. That's a lot of times why we've made those options before men, and that has discouraged them. So I think that's important, is trusting them, moving toward them, modeling for them, right? Walking with them. I think that's the key.
Yeah, beautiful. I love all of that. I love that. That's so good. And I see it, man. I got a chance to spend some time with you and your family this weekend, and I think there was this one moment where your son, we were talking about basketball, and he threw out a term. We were talking about the brain. I'm forgetting the term he threw out. Do you know what I'm talking about? What?
Neuroplasticity, maybe?
Yes, that's the word. I remember looking at him like, how old are you? I didn't learn that word till college. You know, and so
he probably got that from Andrew Huberman or
something. And he's like, right, Dad? You know, like after he said it, and I'm like, man. So just the way you're moving towards them, watching your life, your doctrine, like I see it, and I get excited about some of the things that you're doing on a local level. And so this is good, man. I'm edified. I'm blessed by this conversation. Let us know in the comment section if you want a part two, I mean, we really just scratched the surface, and there's so much to unpack, and it's such a needed conversation. So let us know what you thought. Leave a comment. Hit the like button if you have not subscribed. We just were looking at the analytics today. 72% of y'all have not subscribed yet. That is a problem. So hit the subscribe button so you get more content like this, and it helps the algorithm so that people like you can also engage with this content as well. We love you, family. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. Until next time, peace and grace.